In a year full of heavy hitters, it takes a lot to stand out. But when Bethesda Game Studios introduces their first new IP in almost 30 years, that alone is more than enough to grab attention. Fair or not, historical milestones like this are a lightning rod for armchair judgment, but after spending over 70 hours traveling amongst the stars, we finally have a clear picture of whether or not Starfield lives up to the lofty pedigree of not only its predecessors, but the recent deluge of phenomenal releases.
I have a good feeling about you.
Group hug now or at the end of the shift?
Starfield's action RPG gameplay is set long after humanity has ventured out into space and colonized the galaxy. As you explore what's known as the settled systems, you're free to craft your own story, navigating a complex and dangerous reality that leaves you guessing where you'll end up next. While there is a set path forward to a final goal, the bigger draw is that you're constantly nudged to deviate and get lost for hours on end in countless adventures. It starts with a very comprehensive character creator and the ability to pick your background and character traits, which award you certain abilities that will not only influence your skill set, but the way some people react to you. You're always free to try to pursue other traits as you level up and earn skill points, but it's virtually impossible to really invest in every single one, so you're going to have to pick and choose carefully. As with most decisions in Starfield, everything comes with a unique set of consequences.
Wait, what was that?
Open fire!
This plays out almost immediately in one of the opening missions when you're targeted by a band of space pirates. This first showdown can play out much differently if you manage to talk some sense into them by using your persuasion skills. Should you fail, a shootout will ensue, but if you succeed, you'll walk away none the worse for your troubles. Bethesda veterans are used to this type of complex cause and effect choice system, and it's back in full force and just as potent as ever, as these types of decisions continuously present themselves. This freedom of choice extends into which quest lines you want to invest your time in. You can stick to the main plot of helping a group of scholars and explorers known as Constellation track down ancient artifacts in hopes of unraveling one of the great mysteries of the universe. Or you can spend countless hours traveling down another path, say joining the Freestar Rangers as a keeper of the peace, trying to root out a group of bandits terrorizing nearby farmers. The beauty of Starfield is that you have so much freedom to take on whatever challenges or roles you see fit. It can be intimidating for sure, and not every thread is a winner, but some of the best moments in this game come from overhearing a random bit of information that prompts you to investigate. You might end up working a remedial day job, making illegal drugs for a crime syndicate, or find yourself at a hidden base of one of the galaxy's most notorious assassins. There's an alluring sense that you never know what might come next. Given the setting, you'd expect space exploration to further complement the sense of freedom. Unfortunately, space is probably the most disappointing aspect of Starfield. The galaxy is divided into smaller zones, whether it's major cities, random regions of a planet's surface, or a tiny area of space in the orbit above. Nothing is seamlessly interconnected. Instead, you mostly fast travel to destinations when they aren't within walking distance, and these divisions are made more painful by the rather long loading times. Even when you reach a new part of space or an unexplored planet, there's very little to actually do outside of major landmarks. Scanning a planet's surface by running up to flora, fauna, and other natural resources quickly gets old. Some players will likely be captivated by building outposts and managing resources to improve them, but it's something you can completely ignore if it's not your style. It's more depressing when it comes to the space above, which is essentially a glorified skybox with very little to see or do. Maybe you'll find a few enemy ships to fight or a space station to dock with, but there's very little space exploration, let alone reasons to manually pilot your ship. Even some objects in orbit around a planet require you to fast travel to them rather than navigating manually, such as Constellation space above their home planet. You also can't fly within the atmosphere above the planet's surfaces. It just destroys any sense of immersion when it comes to this aspect of space exploration, and given the game's namesake, what you can do with your ship feels surprisingly limited.
Landing site locked. Take us in.
That being said, there are numerous points of interest on the hundreds of worlds presented to you in Starfield. While some are merely abandoned outposts or random natural formations to be scanned, there are several that uncover something much more meaningful and rewarding. A rare weapon could be housed in the depths of a mining operation, or you might stumble across a military base under siege that requires your assistance if they hope to make it out alive. The latter usually comes with important decisions to be made, some of which can have an impact down the line in your adventures. While space exploration may be a letdown, the Starship element certainly has its strengths. You start off with a basic ship provided by Constellation, but over the course of the game, you can easily acquire many more ships to add to your lineup. Each is very distinct, not only due to their various properties and abilities, but also in terms of their exterior appearances and interior layouts. Obtaining a new ship can be as simple as spending a bunch of credits at a vendor, or you may unexpectedly receive a ship as a reward for completing a complex side quest. There are even opportunities to steal ships, if you're so bold. You also have the ability to customize your ship's parts and layouts if you're willing to invest the time and resources. Like so many other aspects of Starfield, the varied options for starships highlight the amazing amount of freedom that's always at your fingertips.
I don't care what kind of lies Barrett programmed that robot to say. We're taking that ship.
Making choices can come down to dialogue options, but they can also result from your actions. How you physically navigate your environments and deal with the occasional hostile situation is just as important as what you say. Your character traits and skills will come in handy in how you decide to go about tackling enemies during an encounter. Do you go in guns blazing? If so, what type of gun will you use? What if hand-to-hand combat is your specialty? Perhaps an indirect approach is better suited, where you can simply hack into a base's defenses to disable them, or even turn them against their owners. Or you can invest in skills that simply allow you to sneak by undetected. While not quite up to par with some of the best shooters out there, Starfield's shooting mechanics are more than serviceable, and there are definitely still light RPG elements going on under the hood, including critical hits and other bonuses based on the skills you've unlocked and enhanced. There are also unique elements to consider in some combat scenarios, including unlocking the jetpack ability to gain a vertical advantage over your opponents, or dealing with zero-gravity shootouts. Of course, aside from engaging in person-to-person firefights, there are also the battles that unfold in the darkness of space, involving your starship and enemy spacecraft. The basics are akin to typical 3D flight combat games, but there's a unique target lock-on system that allows you to temporarily focus on certain ship systems in an effort to disable them and gain a tactical advantage. This may seem a bit like FTL at first, especially with the visual similarities, but it plays much differently. Additionally, you can also micromanage your own energy units and reallocate some into other ship systems as needed, such as boosting the power on your weapons or diverting power to your engines or shields.
Whatever you did up there has lit a fire under their asses. Get back, pronto! We need you!
It may seem rather in-depth at first, but in practice, it's hardly spectacular. In fact, victory or defeat most often comes down to simply how high your level is compared to enemy ships, how many enemies you're dealing with, or simply maneuvering behind your enemy and easily maintaining that advantage. To be blunt, space combat is very simplistic and unrewarding, and similar to Starfield's shortcomings when it comes to space exploration, starship battles leave much to be desired. There's a lot of gear, items, and random knickknacks to sift through as you make your journey. Aside from things like weapons and armor, there are lots of resource materials to invest in several crafting systems to improve weapons, gear, and outposts. Plus, a variety of healing items are needed to deal with various afflictions you can encounter on different worlds. It might sound overwhelming at first, but after a few hours, things start to feel more familiar. Starfield's stamina meter takes the form of an oxygen gauge. Actions such as running, jumping, and using your jetpack consume oxygen, and once it's depleted, these actions start building up deadly carbon dioxide, which will impair your vision and eventually deplete your health. Managing this is further complicated by how much gear and inventory you have on you. Should you be carrying more than your mass allotment allows, you'll become encumbered, which means you can't do anything other than walk slowly without depleting your oxygen. This can be a headache, but Starfield gives you ample opportunity to offload unwanted items similar to past Bethesda games. Whether you want to saddle your party members with the extra weight, temporarily stuff items in random crates, or haul things back to your ship to store them in the cargo bay, you can typically find something to do with unwanted junk until you get somewhere to sell it off for more credits. Whatever the solution, you'll want to avoid being over the limit, not only due to the impact on stamina, but because you can't fast travel while encumbered either. In general, when it comes to quality of life features, Bethesda could have done a better job. While you're scavenging items or even buying things from shops, you can't tell whether you already have a surplus of that item in your inventory. There also aren't any maps to give you a better sense of direction when exploring major cities, just broad topographical maps of the planet's surface that aren't particularly helpful when trying to work your way through winding streets and back alleys. Obviously, for the PC version, you can expect modders to step in and remedy many of these issues, but for Xbox players, you're stuck hoping for a future patch at best. Visually, Starfield definitely has its moments when it comes to breathtaking vistas. Venturing through space holds some of the most wondrous sights, sometimes bordering on the unbelievable. Then, there are the occasional oddball visual glitches, which are somewhat of a staple for Bethesda. To be fair, they're typically amusing oddities to be easily dismissed, as they don't immediately impact gameplay, but there are times when it does cross that line, or force you to reload an earlier save. As for the game's overall performance, ahead of a day one patch, the frame rate wasn't as consistent as we would have liked, with frequent dips when sprinting in cities, combat situations, or portions of the game with lots going on in the environment. However, after putting more time in since the patch dropped, it's clear that the performance is much improved, as almost all of the previous situations haven't resulted in the same dips we were seeing before. Another important visual element in such a story-driven game is the facial animation behind the characters. Compared to older Bethesda games, it's clearly a step up. However, alongside other contemporaries, it's clear there's room for improvement as some of the characters' facial expressions and movements appear stiff and unnatural. A game set among the stars comes with certain expectations when it comes to the music, as some of the most iconic songs come from media pertaining to the great unknown that is outer space. The main theme certainly leaves its mark with its sweeping sounds, yet the rest of the soundtrack really isn't trying to stand out. Rather, it wonderfully sets the tone and atmosphere, whether it's the sense of awe while taking in majestic vistas, the frantic beats while evading enemy ships in a desperate dogfight, or the haunting vibes of walking through an abandoned space station, wondering what may be lurking in the shadows. Starfield is a very ambitious game, and while it brings much of what veterans of past Bethesda games love to the table, it underdelivers on the promises of captivating space exploration. It could also use a bit more polish, especially when it comes to some notable quality of life omissions and visual hiccups. Despite these shortcomings, Starfield affords you the freedom to play how you want and provides worthwhile storylines that are rich and complex, regardless of which paths you go down. Sometimes, it truly is all about the journey. Final score, 8 out of 10. Thanks for watching our review. We're Easy Allies. We've been writing about games for decades, and we also do podcasts, streams, shows, and more, all funded by regular viewers just like you. Head to patreon.com/easyallies to pitch in and get rewards, and be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay connected on YouTube. See you soon.